Hello, everyone, and welcome to another broadcast of HoloTalk. I'm here today with Oguz Yetkin, who is president and CEO of Yetkin Telesystems. And Oguz is going coast to coast here in the United States, and he's researching three-dimensional imaging systems. And he's here in the studio with us today. How are you today, Oguz?
I'm great, Frank. Thank you very much.
Good. If I could just have you hold the microphone up close.
Sure.
There we go. I thought it would be interesting for you to come on the show to let listeners know something about some of the competing technologies that holography is facing with three-dimensional imaging. And I know you've gone around the country and you've seen some of these startling three-dimensional effects that's being created by other systems. What are some of those systems like, and how does holography compare to them?
Sure, let me summarize. I actually have been working with these 3D technologies for a while. I worked on them with NASA for a while, and it's always been an interest of mine. The easiest system that people can approach right now are LCD shutter glasses. These are electronic glasses that works either with a monitor, a CRT monitor that's capable of high refresh rates, or with some of the newer projectors that can support refresh rates of about 100 Hertz or 120 Hertz. The basic principle is that the monitor displays left and right eye images in succession. It's called frame sequential stereo. And the glasses alternately block out the right and left eye, thus giving the user the illusion of 3D inside the monitor. The main problem with these is, one, you need a graphics card capable of driving them, and two, if your refresh rate is not high enough, it gives you a headache. You can see the flicker from fluorescent lights. However, most 3D technologies right now are based on this or something similar to it. And, I'm looking to resell some of these technologies, so I shouldn't bash them too much. But E-Dimensional is a company that makes the cheaper version of these glasses. Crystallize, on the other, that's about $100, $200 per pair. On the other side of the spectrum is Crystallize, which places like NASA use, which have the better quality. This is starting at the low end. At the higher end, you have similar systems. You have dual projector stereographic vision systems. Places like IMAX and some other movie theaters use this. This is where you take two projectors, either film or electronic. You stack them together with polarizing filters on each of them and shoot the images at a non-depolarizing screen. So it has to be a special kind of a screen, like a silver screen that's not necessarily cheap. But a lot of movie theaters might be equipped with them. You wear what are called passive polarized glasses, where each side of the glasses blocks a part of the image. Thus, you get an illusion of stereo. The advantage to that is you get very nice, you get very nice depth, you get very nice stereo. You might get some ghosting if it's not set up properly. And
I see.
They're kind of expensive.
The ghosting would be, I guess, a registration issue, right?
Well, it can be a registration issue, but more importantly, it's an issue of a polarizer not being perfect.
I see.
And there are different types of polarizers. There is linear polarization and circular polarization, which I won't go into simply because my physics is not enough to explain it. But this is what you have to do if you have a large movie theater. Otherwise, you can get to a very, very, very expensive stereo projector that can do, say, 120 or 144 hertz, and have the electronic glasses to go with that. I know there is a company called Real D that's doing something like that has really high-power projectors. There's something called a Z-screen that goes in front of the projector, turning that frame sequential stereo to something that can be viewed with regular passive polarized glasses. So these are the technologies in that realm. There's also something else. I'm actually reselling this. It's the Arisawa P240 monitor.
Now, this is on a more personal scale rather than a theater scale.
That's correct. So this takes the same idea and actually does away with the need to have a very high refresh rate. What this technology uses is, LCD panels are already polarized. The LCD technology uses polarization to block off the right type of light to make the picture. So this monitor polarizes the pixels alternately. So for example, even pixels might be the image for the left eye. Odd pixels might be the image for the right eye.
Oh, that's interesting. And very, very simple, too.
It's very simple in concept. I'm sure it's not easy to get that registration. Mm-hmm. So these monitors, and there are a couple other companies making them, I believe. This is the only one I'm familiar with, the Arisawa monitor. They only require passive polarized glasses. The advantage is, you get really good depth, you get a very clear image, and you don't have flicker. Disadvantage is you still need a certain viewing angle. You still need to be in about 15 to 20 degrees of the image. But that's actually a good solution, ranging from $2,000 to $4,000 as far as I know. You still get it's a personal system. The price point has gone down from the professional to the personal.
I see.
Because, larger projector systems, there is a projector right now, the DefQ projector, that's around $4,000. But the larger systems used by places like NASA go from $30,000 up. Mm-hmm. So this is much more of a personal thing that you could have in your home. I have two in my office. They're wonderful. I can watch 3D movies with them. They work really well with 3D interleaved DVDs, of which...
So you don't have to have program material that's been specifically encoded to be placed on this screen.
Well, you do actually, but there is software out there that takes regular DVDs and tries to convert them into 3D.
I see. It's like a conversion process.
And the converted DVDs are not ever as good as a movie.
Something that would be shot, yeah.
But it actually does well. What is easier to do is to take a 3D image source, for example, to take a game and actually intercept the graphics rendering pipeline and extract those two images. And there are drivers to do that. Mm-hmm. So you can take a game like World of Warcraft, download a $5 driver, and actually use it with this monitor.
Okay.
And, play the game in 3D. Or you could have, if you have, for example, a stereo microscopy application, those dissecting microscopes that surgeons use. You can put cameras on the microscope and have a live feed. And I know several surgical teams and several medical schools have used this technology to train surgeons. Because when you see, for example, the brain surgery being performed in 3D, it looks like it's got a lot more information. Because I know a brain surgeon than 2D, but having a biology background, I can actually see that depth. I can actually see that value in 3D. So that's the polarized kind of displays, whether active shutter glasses or passive polarized.
Mm-hmm. And they run the gamut from large theatrical productions all the way down to something that would be personal just for an individual.
That is correct.
As far as their scope.
Now there is another type of technology. These are the autostereoscopic monitors, and I think these are the displays that actually try to compete with holography.
Okay.
So these are usually, not always, but usually based on lenticular screen technology. This is when the monitor, it could also be a print, has microprisms in front of it. With each prism directing a strip of the image, you have to interleave the image properly for this. Each prism directs a strip of the image to a different viewing zone. Mm-hmm. So within about 20 or 30 degrees, you have 8 or 9 different images you're viewing. Kind of like what you do with a stereogram.
Okay.
The advantage is you don't need glasses to see it. Mm-hmm. And you can print these pretty cheaply. You can actually print these, get a sheet for maybe like $2 from Microlens or a similar supplier, register it on your sheet, and have some depth. You've probably seen these.
I've seen them in commercial applications, I think, already, with a few fast food places on their large menu displays and things. Am I correct about that?
You're absolutely correct about that. You probably have seen them on gift cards, cereal boxes. There was a company called Nishika in the 80s and up to the early 90s.
Oh, with the camera.
Yeah, they had a camera. It was wonderful. It was a very high lines per inch kind of a print that they made for you from the images you sent. Unfortunately, that company appears to have gone out of business. Mm-hmm. But I'm actually going to go down to North Carolina to talk to Microlens about this technology in my survey of 3D technologies. Mm-hmm. So this is easier to work with. The monitors are approaching affordable. 3 or 4 years ago, I looked at the Synthogram monitor, which was based on this technology. It was pretty good. it did not have as much depth as I would have liked it to have for the application we needed at the time. So it did not have as much depth or clarity as the shutter glasses. However, something like that is wonderful for a marketing kind of application where you can put it in a display window. And, people going by see it. The disadvantage, and the biggest disadvantage for this is you sacrifice resolution for depth. So if you have 9 different viewing zones, that cuts the resolution of each viewing zone in 9. So with those monitors, for example, the Synthogram was built on a 3200 to 2400 LCD monitor, if I recall properly. But when you were displaying a 3D image, you couldn't really read text on it. You didn't have high resolution. Yeah. And the viewing zones are limited. So once you get out of the viewing zone, you get into the new viewing zone, there is a shift. Now, there are advances being made in this field with eye-tracking otosterioscopic monitors. The advantage is you no longer have the viewing zones. The monitor changes itself to follow where the viewer is. The disadvantage is that you have only one person who's able to view this thing at one time and make sense out of it.
I see.
Now, there's another kind of technology that Oguz uses I should mention. It's head tracking technology. As your listeners know, holograms have parallax. And
they should know that, and if they don't, I'd be very disappointed in them.
Maybe they should be listening to a different show. But holograms have very good parallax, both vertical and horizontal, and that's why they can be viewed by multiple people at the same time. Most of these technologies do not have parallax. Most of these technologies have only one image. The lenticular screens and the lenticular prints have some parallax, say as much as a stereogram that you might make, about 8-9 images. I haven't seen them with more than that. But to compensate for that, there are systems that require the user to wear a head tracker. This is a 6 degree of freedom tracker that tracks the user's location in space and how their head is oriented. And the computer is instructed to change the scene. So, if you have that information, if you're driving this from a 3D application, so that you get the illusion of looking at something like a hologram. For example, there is a system called the Cave, which is 3 to 6 walls of stereo that the user is immersed in. When you're inside that and you put on those LCD shutter glasses with a tracker attached to them, you're basically in something resembling the holodeck. It's very convincing. You can, using a 3-dimensional mouse, you can grab objects, you can walk around objects, you can look under objects. So this is a way to augment these systems to make them more convincing. But
where would someone go to experience something like this, the Cave?
I know NASA has several.
I see.
Several universities have them. A more affordable system is the Immersidesk, which is a one-wall version of this.
I see.
Unfortunately, I don't know if there are any commercially available systems for this.
Okay.
Actually, there are 2 more technologies I forgot to mention. I'm sorry, I'm jumping from place to place here. There are head-mounted displays, which I'm sure everybody's heard of. When people think virtual reality, they think
of the helmet. Yeah.
So these helmets usually work with the head tracking. What they have are 2 different monitors embedded inside the helmet that you put on. And there is head tracking, so you are essentially immersed inside the world, inside this virtual world. These are becoming more affordable. I know there are helmets under $1,000 right now. There are eyeglasses, which are quite popular. The problem with the cheaper HMDs is the limited field of view. It's not quite like being inside the world. It's more like being inside the world looking through welding goggles. You get the stereo, you get the stereo vision, you get the head tracking, and you can move around. But they're kind of heavy, and I have not seen any HMDs right now that are very good that I wouldn't mind spending 3-4 hours in. If somebody does want to experience this, however, there are various really high-end video arcades that feature these. One I can think of off the top of my head is Disney Quest near the Epcot Center, not inside Disney World itself. But near downtown Disney in Orlando, they have a place called Disney Quest, which is about a 5 to 6 story video arcade, and there are some systems there featuring HMDs, which are actually very entertaining. There's the Magic Carpet Ride. This was a couple of years ago. There was one game that was immersive, where you had something like a sword and you were battling cartoon characters.
Okay.
That's the most immersive game I've ever played. So there is this technology, and I'm hoping the price will come down, because really wonderful applications would be enabled with high-quality head-mounted displays.
Yeah, I think they're working on something with cycling for training. They have something now that runs off of a PC, and you look at a monitor, and you can buy rides like the Tour de France and whatever.
Oh, nice.
But they're working on a helmet so that you can be immersed into the environment that you're cycling in. And the trainer that you're working on, that you attach the bike to, is controlled by the computer as well. So if you start to go up a hill, there's more resistance applied to the bicycle on the trainer, and you actually feel like you're going up a hill resistance-wise anyway. Heart rate goes up, breathing rate goes up. That would be a great application for something like that.
And there are several
sports training.
I did not know about that. That sounds very neat. There are several applications like this. One of them I saw at a conference, was from the University of Hawaii. They had a virtual beach. Now, I don't know why anybody would need a virtual beach in Hawaii, but they were trying to treat post-traumatic stress syndrome, with full immersion. Now, I'm rooting for this kind of technology, because I'd love to have a helmet, I could plug in and, program virtual worlds in. I don't think we're there yet in the civilian world. I think there are really higher-end HMDs, like $20,000 and up, that have the field of view required for full immersion. Mm-hmm. But for actual immersion, for the most holodeck-like experience, the best thing I've seen is the Cave and its related technologies. That's stereo, LCD shutter glass stereo with head tracking. Now, I did see one amazing display at SIGGRAPH last year. It's a very popular graphics conference where everybody comes and showcases their technologies and presents their papers.
There's been some holograms there over the years as well.
I might have seen that. There was one hologram-based. There was a company called Rabbit Hole that had very convincing 3D. That had a very convincing 3D hologram. I think they're on the more expensive side, but you probably know more about those than I do. What I saw was a display called Holographica. Well, it's made by a company called Holographica from Hungary, and this is a very large display using a holographic optical element as its screen.
I see. Yeah.
I don't know much more about its technology except that it supports 64 viewing zones, requiring at this time 64 projectors. But the image you see is amazing. The image you see is basically, without glasses, this 3D animated thing floating in space. I think their price, and I hope these companies don't get mad at me.
Everybody loves those floating in space images, right?
Yeah, and this is what people expect, but they almost had. You're still looking at a screen, obviously, and I think their price was about $350,000.
Okay.
The disadvantage being you need a whole room and a whole cluster of Linux PCs rendering this.
Yeah.
Now, none of these displays, to the best of my knowledge, have things like focus information. They don't capture the phase information that's coming from that a hologram captures.
Are you speaking and referring about depth of field?
Well,
when
both
you say
depth
that,
of field and the ability to focus on different parts of the image.
Oh, I see.
Now, there may be work going on in this field that I'm not aware of, where people are working on this kind of information, but there are things in real life in 3D that you take for granted. For example, if you were to hold your finger in front of your eyes and look at it, you see that your eyes converge on it and everything else becomes double vision.
Yes.
You look further away, your finger, you see two fingers. This is a part of the visual cues that you get in the real world. This is what you're used to, even though it's not immediately apparent that you lack it when you're watching an IMAX movie. Mm-hmm. But this ultimately causes eye strain. So a hologram capturing every single thing that's coming from the object, perhaps except the color, doesn't have this. So it's got that clarity that you can't necessarily have in these other systems. Mm-hmm. Obviously, holograms are really not competing with these systems since you don't have full motion holograms yet. Mm-hmm. By the way, there is another exotic kind of technology, and your listeners might be familiar with this, called volumetric displays. This is when where you're spinning a screen very fast and projecting images on it so that inside that space, you have 3D. Mm-hmm. But the one I saw was done with a DLP projector running at 240 hertz.
Oh, I see.
But I'm sure they've been done with LCD arrays. I think they've been done with lasers.
Okay.
And, they look convincing. but
it's mostly with line art or whatever, or...
It is. I've seen video. With the DLP version I saw at SIGGRAPH, there was actual black and white video of a man running.
Oh, I see, okay.
Which was amazing. Which was like a full motion hologram in space, except of course you can't reach into it. But I think that technology and the hardware to support it is a little ways off yet.
Do you ever do any searches on the web to find holographic displays and then see that what you're looking at really isn't a hologram, that it's some other type of display and it's just being called a hologram?
You know, everything...
Are you finding that a lot?
I'm finding that quite a bit. Everything that's 3D... It calls itself holographic. I mean, from the illusion, for example, the otosterioscopic display I got was called a synthogram. I mean, that's an intentional allusion to a hologram. There are these displays that have literally smoke and mirrors. I mean, they have some sort of mist projected into space.
Yes.
They project an image and they say holographic image. When Al Gore was doing those State of the World concerts, it is said he appeared as a hologram in Tokyo. What they used was a gauze kind of a fabric with his image projected onto it.
I mean, so far from holography that it's not even funny to even call it a hologram.
And I saw the company, I don't remember its name now.
There's been arguments on the web that was a hologram.
Really?
And it's like, it's enough to drive people insane, especially if you're a holographer.
I'm sure it drives you insane. You know, I've seen, I've seen the cave system referred to as holographic, which, you know, I can kind of buy. I mean, it's not holographic, obviously, but, you know, you have the same kind of parallax, so it's similar to holography. The LCD shutter glasses I got were touting themselves as a holographic 3D experience from your PC.
I see.
Which is not. The only system I saw that I thought was doing this, which is not, is the Holographica system, which does use a holographic element in it.
Okay.
But yeah, that must be annoying to you. That must be, and those in the holography community.
Yeah, well, it's getting worse. That's it's very difficult because it's more difficult because of public expectations of what a hologram should be when they come to see a hologram, and it's not floating around the room, and it's not being projected somewhere, and it's beautiful three-dimensional images on a wall, but that doesn't seem to count anymore.
Now, talk to George Lucas. I think Princess Leia ruined it for you.
She's the culprit, right?
Yeah, I mean, that holographic projection from R2-D2, I think that's what people expect.
Yeah. I think that's what started a lot of... I mean, there had been some films where holograms have been in the films before that. But I think Star Wars was what probably started that notion of what a hologram should be as far as something being projected out in space.
Now, who knows, maybe someday we will get a technology that is capable of projecting images out in space. I've heard of things proposed with intersecting high-power lasers in air and heating up the air so that
there's plasma
voxel there.
Yeah.
I don't know if those will ever happen, but they still won't be holograms.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you know, light doesn't stop anywhere. You know, it continues to move. You can't send it out 12 feet and tell it to stop and form something. But I've heard of what you're referring to as far as ionizing the air, you know, where the two lasers intersect. But then you've got lasers that continue on after that intersection point, so I'm not quite sure
I don't
what
know
that
if
would
I
look
want
like.
to be around such a display when it's running. I'll keep my safe distance and admire it from a distance.
Yeah. So what's your future plans? You're working with holography here in the lab, and you've seen holograms. What's your... you've done holography in high school.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Early on.
So I have to thank Mr. Van, my physics teacher from Wauwatosa West, for giving me the opportunity and getting me, started on this. My plans are, I've started Yetkin Telesystems, which is a 3D products and services company. I want to offer all sorts of 3D products, ranging from these relatively expensive, I'd say they're cheap, of course, since they're not $30,000, like these $4,000 projectors to, $3 Viewmaster style cardboard viewers.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to offer all of these technologies, hopefully holography as well, to my clients in Turkey. I'm starting the company over there, or in the United States, as the case may be, who are interested in not only just buying these things, but also integrating them with whatever they're doing. So, for example, might offer 3D movie theaters for hotels, for higher-end hotels, using these projector technologies. I might go to an arcade and, set them up with the 3D monitors, or set them up with a rear projected, 3D system where, with some head tracking where their users feel like they're inside the game. Basically creating miniature versions of these caves and immersive desks that, are in the, sub $10,000 range. I'm hoping with the holograms to sell them to companies. Frank has this wonderful way of doing logos with a relatively simple process from a computer image that float in space.
Mm-hmm.
I think that has potential as a really cool novelty until it saturates the market, and I've never seen them, so the market is pretty empty of those. I would love to offer and be able to do holograms, custom holograms for companies with their logos and such.
Well, they're good for trade shows, conventions, when they have a booth or something. The one that I have over here on the wall was actually used in Dusseldorf, Germany for a book fair, a book convention, a worldwide book convention. And it's basically for a draw. You want to get people to your booth. You want to get people to get your company's information. So they actually, the holograms I did for them were 30 by 40 centimeter. That's an 8 by 10 there. But they put those in their booths, and they had people, standing around looking at this logo floating out in space, and their salespeople could go out and, approach them to give them information about the company.
At this point in time, in 2007, I think anything 3D still draws crowds at trade shows. For example, at SIGGRAPH, the Rabbit Hole company that had a full color or seemingly full color hologram had people congregated around it asking the owner what this was.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they couldn't even figure out it was a hologram.
Yeah.
So for anybody trying to differentiate their product, I think, or differentiate themselves at a place like a trade show or even a shop, it's a great conversation piece. It's a great crowd draw. I mean, you say on your webpage, vanity is like the ultimate marketing tool.
Well, it is in a sense,
But I mean, I'd love to have that of myself. That's why I say that.
Yeah.
But I'm basically going to span the gamut of 3D products and services, and hopefully, bring it to a place where it really hasn't been that popular in the past.
I want to thank you for being on the show. I'm sure the listeners found what you have to say about 3D competing technologies very interesting. I think they may be already aware of some of them, but you may have had, a few in there that they hadn't heard of before, and some of the ones that they did hear of, you probably clarified a few things for them. But out of all the technologies, including holography, I would have to ask you this before we close the show. Which one gives you the best visual three-dimensional space?
Well, I think holography is untouched in terms of clarity right now. If you want to see something that's as real as the object, I mean, holography is a holy grail. And I think, these people who are working on those technologies, myself included, understand this. That's why everybody is saying, our technology has holographic clarity. It's a holographic experience.
Mm-hmm.
The holograms don't substitute for things like interactive 3D, which most of these technologies are geared towards. But if you had to archive like museum materials, I think holography is the way to go.
That's interesting because there's a conference coming up in London next year on archiving museum materials.
From the hologram, you could probably go to all these other technologies.
Yes. Well, I want to thank you for being on the show, taking your time. And the two of us are now going to go over to the holography table, and we're going to do some work. And thank you for listening to the show, and hope you tune in for each new installment as they become available here at HoloTalk. So thank you, and good night.